Hey there, this is Chris from PC Gamer, and I'm joined by Krett, Smite caster, analyst, and coach to discuss the final day of play at the Smite World Championship 2015. Sum up the day for you. We'll talk about the matches specifically in a second.
The day for me was sort of the end of all the storylines in many different ways, and I think it was really fascinating to watch it all come together. There were so many storylines going into this event. Every top 4 team had something going on. It was all resolved, and then there's a bit of a cliffhanger. What's going to happen in Season 2?
You're right, like the 4 teams remaining, 2 from NA, 2 from EU, the 2 COG teams plus SK Gaming and Titan each had a different journey here. Titan famously coming through from basically the amateur league. SK kind of fighting their way in as well. The COG team sitting at the top of the NA mountain for a long time, but not necessarily challenged in that position, this being their real encounter with outside pressure. So the first game of the day was basically the third place match between SK Gaming and Cognitive Red. Going into that game, I called like SK 2-1 and was dramatically wrong about that. Red really cleaned up and did so really convincingly. What do you think caused that? What was the origin of their success?
I think the origin of Red's success in that match was actually Titan's 2-0 victory the day before. It just never seemed like SK recovered. They were a shadow of their former selves. They did not dismantle COG Red the way that they did in day 1, and as a result, they lost very quickly. I love SK. They're a great team. Reels, their captain, is huge. But going into Season 2, there needs to be some changes, maybe roster changes, maybe the addition of a coach, analyst. This is a great team. They can do really well. There's just something missing in terms of morale and in terms of the cohesive play.
It felt as well like they weren't quite playing themselves. I don't know if that's fair. Like I associate them with really aggressive play, particularly Maniac, their solo laner, who's kind of known for diving wherever the hell he likes and getting whatever the hell he wants done. And he was on Aphrodite in the first game, which is not a character that can really do that. Do you feel like they outdrafted themselves to a degree?
I think it's hard to say. It just felt like the heart wasn't there in general. I think the draft in part speaks to that, right? Like, they clearly wanted to play Aphrodite. In Game 1, they put it solo. In Game 2, they said, well, that didn't work. Let's put it mid with meditation. In theory, that should work, but it just didn't. And so, maybe the heart and the mind were separate, and they just weren't playing true to themselves, as you said. But I think what it comes down to is Red just had the better games. Red was able to recover in terms of morale, and they looked like a strong team, definitely earning that top 3 spot.
Talking about Red more specifically, like, they are not a team that has lost very much, and the last couple of days is their first real experience of losing in a while to SK and then to their sibling team, called Prime. They are young guys. I did not necessarily expect them to come back as strong today. What would you credit that to?
So COG Red was a team that actually has been used to losing. From the moment they were first picked up by the Cognitive organization to be the sister team, up until the kickoff LAN back in August, they pretty much lost everything, only barely making it to the kickoff LAN and therefore into the Pro League as a result of Complexity, now Complexity and then Snipe, beating out the contender for 4th place and securing COG Red's spot. Since then, and that event where their morale was essentially completely turned around, in great part due to good play and in great part due to Matty Pocket, their coach, they have been winning. And I think this just proves that they are not a ephemeral team. They're here to stay because they can recover from a loss. Now, unfortunately, COG Prime's victory did remove them from Grand Finals contention, but they clearly bounced back. They were completely ready for SK, and they took them out rather quickly.
Moving on to the Grand Final, which I have to say, covering Smite for a relatively short amount of time, covering Dota for a lot longer, is probably the best Grand Final series I have ever seen. It was extraordinary how that went. It began with what looked like the beginnings of a 3-0 stomp for Prime, as they kind of came in and cleaned up Titan. So beginning with that, I wanted to sort of explore the ways in which they totally took Titan apart in those initial games.
Yeah, so the first 2 games, it seemed like pretty much the same story from COG Red. They came in with a plan, they executed their plan, they destroyed their opposition, and that was Game 1, and then it was Game 2, and everything looked good. And going to Game 3, once again, they banned out the supports. They put a lot of pressure onto Kanye Life, and so Kanye Life picked Ares, and that changed everything. Because what's interesting about Titan is they're the least North American team in this tournament. They play Ymir, they play Ares, and North American supports don't think those characters are good. They say, maybe you could run Ymir in the jungle, maybe, but it's not that great. They say Ares, I've seen in ranked a few times, but it's not that great, has no place in competitive, and they completely do not understand how to deal with Ares. That was the story of Games 3 and Games 4.
Games 1 and 2, to a degree, seem to come down to the kind of the flip side of that, which is that Titan's strength appears to be their drafting to a substantial degree, their ability to outthink in some ways or bait certain picks that allow them to counter, like with the Replicas Athena. But their weakness is that the one sort of sticking point in their drafting is always going to be Kanye Life's hero pool, to a degree, right? Like the lack of a Sylvanas, for example, or a Geb. Would you say that was kind of like the hinge? Because they seem to focus on Kanye Life so much in those ban phases.
It's his strength and his weakness. His god pool is essentially Athena, Ymir, and Ares. That's 3 gods. It's very small. And both his Ymir and Ares would destroy Cognitive Prime. They reduce him to Athena, pretty much Athena is what he was reduced to, and he's forced to pick it up early. It modifies the draft from Titan, and it allowed a variety of, I want to say, luxury picks for Cognitive Prime in their last game, where they pretty much got the North American Dream Team.
Moving on to the 2 opposing hunters, which is kind of an interesting thing. Like yesterday, Ataraxia said multiple times that he wanted Prime to win their semifinal because he wanted to go up against Barracuda. And it's that, there's an ego thing there, and there's a kind of desire to show off. How do you think he fared? Because in those games 3 and 4, he did seem to be kind of leading that resurgence for Titan.
Both hunters played so well in this series, and I think the difference has to be the support play. I think both hunters, if all were equal, would go 50-50 every match. Dead even, and in the end, someone would win, in terms of hunter play. But what happened with the supports changed the nature of the lane for the hunters. It changed their rotations, and it changed the jungle pressure on their lane. It changes everything. So it just sort of, the hunter matchup was played fantastically by both Ataraxia and Barracuda, to the point where the play of Kanye Life, formerly Murder, and Jeff Hinla determined who won the hunter lane in every game.
Going into that final game, it felt like it was won or lost on the draft, and particularly on the bans. Do you think that, well, I was going to ask you what particular was the hinge there. For me, I think it was the Nox ban that probably should have been Ao Kuang. I don't know if you agree. What would be your take on that phase?
I think Cog Prime gambled. They left Ao Kuang open, they left Nox open, and they said, right, either Titan bans one of these 2, and we get one, so they get Nox, which would be very impactful. They get Ao Kuang, which would be very impactful. And the other option that they were hoping wouldn't happen would be neither of those characters are banned, something else is banned, and then they have to deal with the trade of one team gets Nox, one team gets Ao Kuang. Very late into the tournament, both of these characters, well, I suppose Ao Kuang was banned the majority of the tournament, but we didn't really fully see his strength until the last game, and Nox really didn't show up until the semifinals, so it was very cool to see both of those characters be so crucial in the final match of the World Championship series.
It's interesting in a way to have a hero like Ares kind of come out of the low tier, right? Like no one really gives him any esteem in NA, while a hero that's really highly esteemed like Ao Kuang, both kind of determine their respective games in that way. Do you still think within the existing balance patch for Smite, there's room for more upsets as we go into Season 2, more kind of shifts like that as things kind of move around and teams are forced to reconsider their orthodoxies when it comes to drafting?
I think we saw a variety of low-tier gods do very well in this tournament, and what that comes down to is the 2 different definitions of low-tier. On one definition, you have a god that is unique, brings something very special to the table, but is extreme to the point where he is not considered good. Anubis, Amazon Cobb, Ares, in North America, Ymir, all fall in this category, and when you just focus on their strengths, they clearly work out. They worked out in every game that they were played in the way that they were intended to. And then there's other low-tier characters that we didn't see played, where it's just you can pick something that does it better. Kukulkan being the prime example, where it's just sort of like, well, you could pick Poseidon, and he has the big ultimate and the zoning tool, and that's what you're picking Kukulkan for, but Poseidon's better.
Fine, to wrap up then, going into Season 2, obviously there'll be a break, teams will take a break now to kind of reset. How would you like to see the Smite scene evolve, having kind of reached this huge landmark in its growth?
It's hard to say because the map changes are going to bring so much, and they're going to be really pretty. So this month I don't think is restful for teams. I think they're going to be on the test server, playing the new map, learning the new map, and seeing what the meta will be it through scrims or just through thinking and practice. And that's definitely a lot of work, and that's going to bring the meta changes. I would definitely like to see more gods. I think we do actually play a very large variety of characters. I'd love to see a statistic on how many gods were picked or banned out of the entire cast, because I think we saw a lot over the course of 3 days. And so for teams, I just think it's refinement, relying more on coaches and analysts and learning the game on deeper levels and taking advantage of oppositions the way that we saw Titan and Cognitive Prime do. Because I think we're at the point in terms of player skill where it's not just who hits buttons better, it's also who thinks better, what team coordinates better, how does everything fit together, and that's a fantastic place for a game to be.
Thanks very much for your time, man. And thank you for watching, and if you have been following it, PC Gamer's Smite coverage on PCGamer.com.